Ready? Okay. Hello everyone and welcome to Team Med 30's Scouting and Strategy MROC presentation. To start off, my name is Amanda Asmeyer. I am a sophomore at Mukwonago High School and I am the strategy lead at Team Med 30.
I'm Lydia. I'll be a senior at the High School of Health Sciences and I'm a programmer, and this year I'm going to help make the strategy app. So a little bit about Med 30. Charged Up was our 22nd year as a team. We went to 3 regionals this year and we won 2 of them. At Greater Pittsburgh Regional, we won the Engineering Inspiration Award, and this is our 2nd year hosting MROC, so welcome back.
Alright, so what we're going to be going over today, kind of the agenda, if you will. So we're going to start off with the purpose of scouting, so match scouting, pit scouting, why you're taking this time, what is this data going to go towards, and how you're going to use it. Then we're going to go into scouting breakdown, so how you want to run scouting, and then how you're going to train your scouters. And then determining scouting metrics, so how we determine our scouting metrics, a few tips to maybe help you guys along. And then we'll talk about match strategy, how we run it, what to talk about, and then we'll talk about our SQL database that we used this year. It was our first year doing it, but that's super exciting. And then we'll talk about pick lists, so how we do it, what you should be talking about, how to talk to other teams about pick lists, stuff like that.
So what is scouting? Scouting is just watching the robots on the field and tracking how they perform based on different metrics. So these metrics can be qualitative things like how good was their defense, or quantitative like how many game pieces did they score, how many penalty points did they inflict. The data that's collected is helpful when wanting to make match strategies, so cooperating with your alliance partners to get the most points. Or at the pick list, when you pick your alliance partners, then you can see what robots are doing well at the competition. It's super important that you scout every single match. You need those accurate data points in order to make the best averages, and missing one match could change the averages of a robot completely. You can miss out on some great robots this way. There's going to be human errors when collecting this data, but you need to scout every single match and all the key info from the match. Another thing that can mess up data is subjective things and opinions from the scouters. Scouter opinions, I mean, it's nice to know what you think about a robot, but scouters can and will find a way to put the world's most confusing and cryptic messages in your free response, and that can just dilute the data and make it really hard to sort through. So, some examples we have on the screen are like average, high, low, mid, scoring what they scored during the match, and then through this we can sort it all into data sheets, which will show the averages for each team member. So pit scouting is going from team to team in the pits, asking questions about the physical aspect of the robot. So like, what kind of drive chain do you use? How big is your robot, with or without bumpers? What autos can you do? Do you guys pit scout? Do any of your teams pit scout? What kinds of things do you ask in the pits?
We're asking things like drivetrain, where they prefer to start, what they think their capabilities are, maybe it's what I mean. Right, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's always good to know. Sorry, it's important to scout every single team again. Maybe you're at pick list and you want to talk about this robot, but then you have no idea what the physical aspects of it are. You should also get a picture of it maybe during pit scouting so that you can know what robot you're talking about. And some things that we don't track is subjective questions, because teams can and will exaggerate their abilities a little bit. I had a team, I think it was at the Pittsburgh Regional. They said they had 29 perfectly working autos, and maybe, but I'm not so sure. So keep that in mind. Okay, so a little more in-depth scouting breakdown. This is how a lot of teams do it. This is how we do it. It's a pretty tried and true method, so with a little adjusting, it should be personalized to whatever your team wants to scout for. So 6 scouters for 6 robots. This way that it's one person focusing on one robot and not having a billion things to keep track of. It's also important to have schedules of who is in the pits, who can be scouting. That way you're not mixing up people, like people are, maybe they're needed in the pits, but they're in the stands and nobody can get a hold of them. It's also good to have, we use timetables, so like somebody has a shift from 10 to 11, they just know to show up at 9:55 for their scouting in the stands at 9:55 until 11. Some teams use qualification match numbers, but that's kind of hard to keep track of. Maybe they don't have the blue line's pulled up and they don't know what match is going on right now. So we use time. Training the scouters, we'll get into that a little bit later, and then seeding. It's really important to have good seeding when watching a match in order to actually see what's going on and get the best data. So this year, we found that in the middle and a little above, so like on a balcony, maybe at the Milwaukee Regional, is optimal for seeing the match. But at some competitions, maybe they're on bleachers, and so we actually had like a chute block the view of the grid, and we couldn't see what game pieces were being scored if we were right in the middle. So we just moved a little bit to the side, and you could see it from a different angle. It's not the best, but you gotta improvise. And then some teams use paper. I know our team used paper for years before even I was on the team, but it's like 80-some qualification matches to keep up with, so it's a lot of paper to go through. And then some people don't have phones, so I know a lot of teams use Google Sheets to do it, but also some people don't have service in the venue. Some kids don't have phones. So we invested in some tablets with just like their Amazon tablets or Amazon, big clunky cases, and those stuff served us well. So then we also have, we call them like match cheat sheets. We had a surprising amount of scouters just scouting the entirely wrong robot that they were assigned. So like they were assigned red robot number 1, but they were watching red robot number 2 or something, and that's because robots aren't always lined up on the field in order. And you can't always see the screen to see what order the robots are in. So what we did was when the schedules come out and a list of all the teams at the competition come out on Blue Alliance on the Wednesday or Thursday before a competition, we have to manually take all of those numbers. So like we make a list for red robot number 1. We see what team numbers are going to be red robot number 1, and we just have qualification match number 1. Team 1, 2, 3 is red robot number 1, and then we just have that for every single match, and then we cross it off after that match is done. That way they actually know what robot they're starting, and that has saved us a lot of pain.
Then they're only looking at one number instead of 6 on the screen, which is hard to see with the glare.
Keep asking, which robot am I scouting?
Yeah.
On your
On the
sheet,
sheet.
just look at the qualification match number, there it is.
Alright, so scouter training. So as we know, the build season can get very hectic, very time consuming, and it can be hard to like talk to your scouters and the people who are going to be taking this time to put all your like things into place. But we found out that it's super important to have these conversations with your scouters before you go to these competitions, so they're not confused, they're not asking a million questions, and they know what to expect. So in the scouter training presentation, we did a presentation, you can kind of see it up here, but we laid out explanations, like the shifts that we'll be doing, how to use our system. So we have our own system, we call it Bear Scouts. It's an app that we use on those tablets. It's kind of laid out in like a Google Forms type situation, if you guys are familiar with that. Just like questions and metrics are just like the types of track, and they're laid out in questions. And they can like tap to how many game pieces they score and like track like the rating on a scale of defense. We use our own app for that. But using an app, it does require them to have a little bit of pre-base knowledge. So we do take like an hour-ish, a little bit more, to talk with other scouters. I remember going at least 10 times going over with these scouters, because I would do it in groups, and then some people wouldn't be there. But it's super important that you don't miss anyone when you're scouting, because maybe you do everybody else, but then this one person who doesn't know how to scout might mess up your averages, and they'll be confused, and it just won't be a good time. So make sure everybody's on the same page, and everybody is expected, and they know what they're doing. So in the batch of very good scouters, I know you guys, if you do scout, you probably have some really good scouters. There might be a few like troublesome scouters or people that don't get it the first time, and don't be afraid to like go over with them and redo a presentation, maybe make another one. Just have conversation with them, find out what's not working, how can we fix this, because if they're not happy and they're giving you bad data, you won't be happy either. So make sure it's an open communication and not just, okay, go to the San Francisco Scout for 6 hours. Like you want to be on a good page with each other, and using a training presentation can be a great way to do that. So we also do a thing like scouting with other teams. So we need 6 scouters for like the 6 robots on the field, which is a lot, especially if your team is smaller, like a few of you guys. So we do reach out to some of our friends before the competition, saying like, hey, do you want to use our system? We'll give you all of our data if you send over a few of our scouters. Or maybe if you don't have your own scouting system, you can reach out to other teams and ask if they'd be willing to let you use your system. Lots of teams would love to do that with you guys, and I know it's a great way for us to do it. So all we do is send over our training presentation, send them screenshots of our app, and then they should be all ready once we get to competition, and then we have like a little scouting coalition together. And it's really nice when we get good data from that. So probably the most important things that we do outline in our presentations, which if you guys make something like this, what you should have in here. So it's behaviors and expectations. So we have like 3 main things that we talk about. So for our scouters, we need them to be on time, which means like 5 to 10 minutes early. We need them to be focused on robots. So maybe you're with your friends, this should be fun, but you shouldn't be like laughing and jumping and running through the sand and stuff. Make sure you're focused and make sure you're doing what you're supposed to do. And then no phones. We use our tablets, so they shouldn't need to be on their phones, especially during the match. I get it like in between if you're just like taking a break, texting your mom or something. But you shouldn't be playing a game and trying to scout at the same time or like listening to music or something like that. You should be focused on this and explain that to them.
And they can like go to the bathroom.
Yeah,
They just
have
have
it's not like a jail cell.
Yeah, they just need to make sure that somebody is scouting the robot.
Yeah. Cool. So now going over determining scouting metrics. So kind of if you're unfamiliar with metrics, they're basically like a tracked field in a situation. So for us, they're questions in our app. But for metrics, you want to have this conversation like week 1, kickoff, like right when you get this game, because all of a sudden you're in week 6 and then you don't have metrics and you don't have a way to scout. Well, what are you going to do? You won't get that data and you don't have a way to pick good robots because you didn't do that. But when you're determining metrics and determining what you want to track, you want to make sure they cover all aspects of the game, or if you're doing pit scouting, all aspects of the robot. You don't just want to cover like teleop and endgame and then forget all about auto, because then who are you going to pick when you need an auto balancer? You won't have that data. So make sure you don't forget any game elements. It's super important to get every single one, because you can miss out on some really good robots by just missing one metric. So when you're having that first initial discussion, you want to have think of the calculations that you're going to be using 5 weeks, 6 weeks down the line at your competitions. So think of the averages, the accuracy, what counts you're going to want to know. So maybe you know you're going to want a robot that can score really well. Okay, so then you want some metrics that track their scoring. Or maybe you think you're going to want a defense bot. Well, then make sure you have a good list of defense metrics, maybe on a scale that you do it. But while covering all aspects of the game, and it's important to have good metrics, you don't want to overwhelm your scouters with too many metrics. So for our team, golden rule is under 30 metrics, around 30 metrics is the best, the most that we use, because it can just get too much. You don't want your scouters in the stands, doing this with 47 metrics, and then they're bored and they're tired and they don't want to be there anymore because you're making them scout so many metrics. And for us, our scouting system was completely different at our first competition, which was week 2 at Midwest, to Houston at week 8. Our scouting system was completely different. It was black and white. Things changed, and that was completely okay. Don't be afraid to change the metrics as the season goes on. It's so important to reiterate, just like you would reiterate your robot, you should be reiterating your scouting system as rule changes happen. Before Houston, that big rule change with supercharged nodes, we had a whole scouting system change just because of that rule change. So be adaptive and know when to change your stuff.
Yeah, and for these scouting metrics, there's quantitative and qualitative. So for quantitative, that's Statbotics and Blue Alliance are great resources for this. Blue Alliance is great for when you're at a competition and you just want to see what robots are there, what matches are going to be in, what did their alliance score, that kind of thing. Statbotics, however, is my favorite site. It was created by a former student from Team 5511 and student at Yale right now. He's the Prometheus of the East Coast, bringing the fire of sorted data. Because Blue Alliance just has alliance numbers and stats, whereas Statbotics takes all of those and sorts it for each individual robot. So you can even take and make hypothetical matches, so you can pair robots up that have never played before, and you can see how they would fare. Or even if you're at a competition and you want to see your odds against the partners you're with, and then the opponents you're with in your next match, you want to see what your likelihood of winning or performing in certain areas would be. Statbotics is great for that. And then qualitative data, for this, it's mostly driver confidence and field awareness. So it's helpful to track how confident the driver seems, maybe just like in an open field or even on a scale from 1 to 3 to kind of make it more quantitative. You can ask the scouters, how confident does this driver seem? Does he have good cycle time? Does the driver quickly score stuff? Do they bump into their alliance partners? Are they playing too aggressive defense or something? And do they have good field awareness? So I'm using a combination of both quantitative and qualitative is the best way to get a high-performing robot with skilled drivers.
Alright, so we do have some of the answers on the screen up here, but I'm going to ask you guys some of these questions and see if, why you think they were good or a bad scouting metric. So if we go over, do you think, did they score well with a yes or no field? Is that, a good, useful scouting metric? Anybody? No? Yes. So for us, we don't like to use these types of questions because did they score well and then having your scouter just say yes, you don't really get the why behind it or how or how do they do this. You're just getting yes, and if you have half the robots with did they score well yes, it's not going to be very useful to you in pick list when you have these big broad questions. So you want these questions to be smaller and more useful, so you can sort by and give you some numbers that will give you a better quantitative instead of just a question like this. And the next one we have is, did you like this team? Anybody take a crack at it? No? Yep. So, did you like this team is a subjective question. So, as we said before, we try to stray away from subjective questions just because it's not factual and it's not really not useful when it gets to the hard picks, because maybe the 35th and the 36th ranked robot are completely the same with a lot of the things I do. You want something that will separate them. And did you like this team? If a scouter just likes a team, that's not really going to separate, and it's not going to make it easier to make these hard decisions. So, yes. And then, did they win this match? Is that a good one? No. So, did they win this match? If you really need this data, you can look at it on Blue Alliance or something like that. But honestly, did they win this match? I'm sure all of you guys have been in a match where you've maybe been paired with some lower level teams against the top 3 ranked teams in the competition, and then you lose it. And that's unfortunate, but I don't think you should be making picks based on if they won how many matches. You could have a really, really low ranked robot and still win the competition just because they are a good robot, but maybe they had some tough matches that day, and it can determine your whole pick list. And then, did they score well with a description? Yeah, I won't make you guys say it. But for this, we do like this metric because it's more of a description field, or how many points they scored. So then we can use it with numbers, and we know why did they score well. Why do these scouters think that they did score well? It's not just yes, they did. You get a why behind it, and you get a description, and it's way easier to sort by, and it's way easier to use that in pick lists. So we like that metric. And then for a comment field, we also really like this metric. We find that comments are super, super useful when it gets down to determining again, the 35th and the 36th ranked robot. And comments are also a really good way to fact check your scouters. So maybe you see one specific match that they said it didn't score any game pieces, but then in their comments they say, that was the best robot, best scorer, did really, really well. That doesn't really line up. Yeah, that doesn't really line up with what they scouted. So then you'll have to go back and re-scout that match, but at least you didn't fully miss that. You still have a way to fact check as another line of defense.
And comment fields are good for if the scouter noted anything during the match that you didn't have in data points. So maybe they broke or something, or maybe they look wobbly, they can note that in the comment field, and maybe if they broke, then you can go tell somebody, and then you have a match with them as alliance partners, and you can go help fix them. Or maybe in pick list, you note that they look very fragile, and you might not want to pick them.
Yes, and then the last one we have is describing defense. We don't like this metric because normally when we track our defense, at least for us, we like to use a scale 1 to 3, 1 to 5, stuff like that. So then when you are describing your defense, you're not just getting, they pushed into the robot, they ran into the wall and stopped them from scoring. You'll get more of a quantitative thing, and you can rank them easier. So then when choosing defense spots, you can just go into your averages and sort by, and then you'll have a whole list of defense spots that you have, instead of having to sort through your data and looking for those robots that play defense on that one side. And then we're going to talk about your use of scouting data. So why are you putting all this effort into scouting? You just like pit scouted every single team, you scouted every single match. Why did you do this? So there are so many ways that you can use your scouting data, and it's super important to use it a lot at competition. But probably my favorite way is using it during match strategy. So to sum up match strategy, it meant myself and our driver going to our match partners before the match, and then talking to them about our strengths, our weaknesses, using our data to look at that, and then talking about what we're going to do in that match. So what was our strategy for that match? And it's so important to use your data during this, because maybe you find that one thing about your other alliance that could make you win the match. Maybe they have a really low score and they're not going to do great, but you have three really good scorers. Then you have a better idea of what's the match going to look like. And kind of down here you can see some of our stats, but we had all of our team members on our lines versus the lines on the other side with all of our stats lined up next to each other. So it's a lot easier to know what we're up against and to know what to expect because we had all of these stats already lined up. So a great thing to use your data for is that we're all familiar with ranks, I assume, but high ranks don't mean like the best teams. Obviously, rank points are a huge thing, but there could be a team that maybe got super easy matches or got really hard matches. They could be ranked completely different on what they should be. So with your scouting data, you can use any of your points really and just sort it in a filter and for averages, and then you can make your own ranks based on what you want to track. So that's our favorite way to do that. It makes picklist a lot smoother and a lot easier because we can literally track anything that we want to and then sort it by, and then we have a list all to ourselves, so we don't have to rely on things like Google Alliance to get us ranks. And then data is used to find the best partners for you during elims. So for picklist, I assume that you guys have probably all attended a picklist meeting, but if you aren't familiar with that, teams normally on like a Friday night will go and talk to their teams, talk to their drivers, their scouters, literally anyone who has like opinions on who they should pick or who they want to be picked by. And they'll use their scouting data for this. And this is super important because you can use your scouting data. Maybe you're ranked number 2 and you want another scoring bot. You can look in your data and find who scores the best. Or maybe you're going to be a second pick and you want to know who's better than you, who can defend better, if it's a different game than this one. You can look in that and then see who's better and then talk to this team that you're trying to get picked by and kind of like sell yourself for that. So literally anything that you want to, your data should be here to use it, and this is why metrics are so important because they'll give you anything and it can make picklist and the whole competition a lot more smoother just because you took this time to go back and to do all this work to get a good picklist. Alright, and then match strategy. So as I talked about a little bit before, match strategy was myself and our driver going to our partners before a match. And then talking to them, and I like to use this handy dandy thing right here that had our whole match. This was given by us by 1591 at Pittsburgh, but it's basically a whole field thing, and you can write what driver stations you guys are in, and you can write your whole match strategy just on here. So with that conversation with match strategy, you want to make sure that you have all your partners there, because if you don't have one person there, they'll be completely confused once you get to the match. So you don't want to do that. You don't want to have like one team doing like circle on a charge station because they weren't told what to do during the match. And when you go to have this conversation, you want to have like 3 main talking points, the 3 main parts of the match: auto, tele-op, and endgame. You want to make sure you cover all of these so you're not confused when you get to tele-op and you're like, oh shoot, I don't know what we're doing. Like, what should I do? So to start off, you're going to want to start with auto. So this year, auto was basically pretty self-explanatory, but you want to make sure there's no collisions, no one's picking up different game pieces. So we have a 3-piece, and maybe another team had a 3 or 4-piece. So then you don't want to make sure, or you want to make sure that they won't pick up the same cubes as you or the phones as you, because then that wouldn't be good, and then you won't get as many points as you want to. And then moving on to tele-op, there can be so many different strategies that you can do. You could play in zones, or have a defender, or maybe you just want your team to like go into a zone and like stay there and just play your own game. For us, we found that that was kind of the best strategy when we got to like champs and IRI, because people were super good at the game and they knew how to fill their grid and they knew how to go to their substations and they knew how to stay in their own lane. So then we could just have people stay and then we could just score up lanes and score up cycles, and then we would get the most points because we could just keep going through that. And then with endgame, so this game was also a little bit easier with endgame just because you just had a balance. but there was like 3 main talking points that you want to do. So if it was going to be a double, a single, or a triple, who was going to be that balancer at the end, and like what time you guys were going to be going up. You should always have this conversation because it's hard for your drive coaches and stuff to have to be yelling out and stuff when they should go up. But before this whole conversation, you want to know what's your own limitations on your robot. You want to have a conversation with your driver, and that's why I bring my driver with me to go to match strategy, because they know what they're comfortable with. You maybe don't if you're just a strategy person, and you want to make sure that you're not telling them to do some crazy things that won't work out well.
Backflips off the chair.
Yeah, to do a backflip. It just won't work out well, and it won't be good for anybody because they're not comfortable with it, and it won't be good. And you want to use your data. I'm going to stress this so much in this presentation. Your data can literally be what can win you a competition to what cannot. You want to know your own strengths versus weaknesses, literally anything that you want to track, you can use in that strategy.
So going back to the metrics a little bit, this is an example from a couple of years ago, and the slide itself is overwhelming, but just an overview, don't overwhelm the scouters. On the right, you can see that there's tons of metrics. It's got to be crazy to try to watch a robot and fill all of that out and keep track of what's going on in the field. And then, yeah, that's got to be impossible to read. And on the left, to be honest, it's still a little bit convoluted and hard to understand, but there's a lot less things to keep track of. It's probably refined. This is probably from week 1 competition to week later in the season. You can refine what you want, pick, or what you want to track throughout the year. You look confused. I'm just as confused as you. I don't know what you're going for. But as you go through pick lists and stuff, it's helpful to know what did you actually talk about, what data did you actually sort through when finding what robot you want to be a partner with, and then just getting rid of everything that you don't need on there.
You want to simplify it. It's going to make it the easiest for you at pick lists to look at things. You don't want to be looking at times and sorting through all that. It's not going to be fun.
And like Amanda said earlier, you can change what you
You look silly.
Yeah, you can change what you track throughout the season. So get rid of things that you don't need, and maybe you want to track. Oh, you wanted to see the coolest looking robot. You want to pick the coolest robot that's red or something. With LEDs, we didn't have that in the data. You can add stuff, you can take stuff out. It's super important. And it's also important to note that there's going to be human errors, like I said earlier. You're not going to get perfect data because scouters are human, and it's a lot of stuff going on in the field. So the simpler, the better, and it's just a lot easier if you refine it down to a simple process. And so for scouting, we use our app called Bear Scouts. It's edited through a JSON file, and you can have different data types, like a drop-down menu for choosing what's a red or blue line, what's a defense body, blah, blah, blah. You can have numbers and open fields for those questions, like quick response questions. And so it's as simple as opening the app, putting in the team number, match number, filling it out, watching the match, and then saving it as a QR code, and then somebody is designated as the QR code scanner in the stands, and they have a computer that it scans into Google Sheets, and it's all sorted into nice data. And so that helps us keep track of all the match data. Like I said earlier, I know some teams use Google Sheets, but like I said, not every team has phones, not every scouter has phones, not everyone has service in the venue, and an app which doesn't use Wi-Fi is what we found to be the best.
If anybody is interested in looking at this app, we do have it on the tablets over there after this, if you guys wanted to check it out. Yeah. Okay, so this is our first year implementing SQL or SQL or SQL, into our scouting. So we use a SQL database or structured query language for anybody that doesn't know. So SQL is an industry standard tool. I mentioned it over here. Uses it at our work, and we are able to implement it into our stuff. This is still a very much work in progress, but this is just kind of what we use it this year for. We use it alongside of our Google Sheets database. So we had all of our scouting scanned onto those tablets. It went into our Google Sheets database, and then we had raw data that was separated into just one cell. So we could upload it through a CSV into here using an SSIS package, which means SQL Server Integration Services. It's basically just like a transfer language that can transfer stuff into SQL. And we transferred it into SQL, which we had created tables and we had stored procedures that we could implement. You can see some of our raw data here with some of our tables over here that we could write queries. We could say maybe at Midwest we wanted an auto bouncer, so we could write a query that said like select all the teams who have auto bouncers in their data, and then we would get a good old list of all our auto bouncers after competition, and then we could take this data, align it with our Google Sheets and all of our other data that we have to really make like a dumbed down list of what we needed. And this was super easy to use and it was super like helpful and we loved using it. So in our SQL, we hosted it in an AWS cloud or an Amazon cloud. So we had all of our tables in this cloud, so then we also could write these things called foreign keys that we'll keep from year to year. So like match number, team number, alliance color, stuff that will be there every single year. We can keep that, so it's in our like what's it called, cloud data, yeah. So we can use it year to year. That won't change throughout the games, like everything else. So we also did this thing that we had an analytical web app. One of our mentors is a front-end developer that helped us develop this nice little web app that we had that we could combine data from Blue Alliance with our own scouting data, which we had in SQL, and we could pull up all of the teams that were in the competition, which you see over here, and then all the things we wanted, so all the metrics we wanted, like drivetrain, weights, the substation we picked up from, which was like the main thing for us this year because we had shoot. We wanted some more robots who had shelf. Like how much they weigh, anything that you wanted, you could pull it up to there, and you could also pull up their last 3 matches, all their averages with their scoring pieces up here compared with their auto. So we really like this, and we want to continue it in the future. But yeah, still working for it.
And even with those the charts, like you can make charts in Google Sheets, but it's very helpful to visualize the data in some other way than just numbers. And then you can also like fact check it, so like maybe the #1 ranked team who always scores 200 pieces every game suddenly scores 0 game pieces, and you can see that little Johnny was scouting that match, and maybe you need to go talk to Johnny and to figure out what went wrong in that match.
Oh, and that's another thing. We also have all of our comments listed. You can't see it. This screenshot is small, but all of our comments are also listed for this team, so we can see what were these comments the same throughout each match? Were they different? Were they breaking a lot? And we could literally just fact check it with this nice old web app thing.
So all of that scouting, everything, it culminates into making a pick list. So it's important to have a pick list regardless of where you're ranked at the end of qualification matches. If you're in the teams, you can become a captain, and no matter where you are, you could be picked by an alliance, and then you can compare your lists to see what other robots would complement your alliance and would work well on your team. So everyone should be able to write down their opinions on robots that they've seen. They can just jot down numbers that they had in mind during the day. Everyone should be able to feel heard and have an opinion on who the team wants on their alliance. But actually creating the list of robots that you want on an alliance is a lot easier with a much smaller group. It'll take a lot less time. You can actually go to bed before midnight or something, maybe sometimes. So less people, as bottom line, is just easier. So more veteran members like mechanical people, maybe programmers, the drive team definitely, and then scouters who are very invested in it. It's just a lot easier to make the list when the group is smaller. And you also want to go over your strengths and weaknesses. Weaknesses especially because like this year we have a robot that primarily takes pieces from the chute. So that means that even if there's a robot that is super cool and scores really well, if they take pieces from the chute, we might not be able to cooperate the best with them, and we might not actually score as well as we want to. So it's always important to keep in mind your robot's abilities when trying to make an alliance compared to other robots' abilities. And then this also ties into what you want in an alliance partner, so like categorizing by just kidding. So categorizing by like maybe you want a defense bot, maybe you want a robot that has great auto or something. Speed, cycle time, substation preference, size, penalty proneness, tippiness. What other things did you look for in robots this year? Say something.
Well, tippiness was definitely one of the things.
Yeah, some robots are really tall.
Did you guys like do the the substations too, or was that just a thing for us? Like you
We looked at scoring locations.
definitely.
Yeah.
You guys?
Yeah, like basically if they're, how well the placement matches with ours, like if they place on like high and we place on low,
Yeah.
with that match as well, so we don't overlap too much.
That is good because it's very helpful to prioritize how much you want these attributes in a robot. So like, let's say you're picking and you want a really good defense bot. You get your dream defense bot on the first pick, but then the second pick comes along and all the high scoring robots are gone, and you just have a very defensive team. You know, maybe that works out, but maybe not. And so you want to prioritize different things that you want in a robot differently. You also have a do not pick list. Just cross off teams that maybe you know won't work well. It saves a lot of time and deliberation, and then you're not on the field accidentally saying the wrong numbers or something.
Playing Jeopardy with it.
Yeah. So. Yep.
Sure, okay.
Yay, yay. So with that base list of just numbers that you had in your head, maybe some robots that tickled your fancy, you can then use your scouting data to compare it to the attributes that you want in a robot. So let's say you want a robot that can shoot cubes into the community, then you can look at all the team numbers that you had in mind and then use your scouting data to compare how well they did that. And so then you can fact check stuff, find the best robots for your alliance. And then you also want multiple robots that can fulfill that role. You don't want to just have 2 robots, so you're like, yeah, this is the first and second pick, good. Because those robots everybody wants robots. They're gonna go, you're not gonna get you won't always get your dream alliance. Also, like if you're alliance number 8, you can't pick the captain of alliance number 1. So keep in mind where you are in the ranks and what robots are actually pickable for you. So make sure you have like a very large list, like how many robots in the rank?
If you're like top 10, you want to have like 24, then you have like double. Just a lot.
Yeah.
Just a lot.
So obviously you can have backups for if your number 1 choice gets picked, and then just have have them ranked in whatever order you would say, so that you're not flipping through lists on the field, just like sorting through data and playing Jeopardy. Like you don't want that to happen. Also, don't be afraid to pick a low-ranked team. I know every team has been a low-ranked team, but feels like we did really well. And yeah, you obviously did if you need to get picked. So if you scouted something special in a robot, the ranks like don't mean anything. So don't be afraid to pick one of these.
Alright, so the last part of pick list is talking to teams. So schmoozing, if you will. So maybe if you're lower ranked, or if you're like ranked number 3 and you want number 1 to pick you, schmoozing, whatever however you say it, is a great way to maybe make these teams like know who you are and like to be more, what's the word? Them to want to pick you. So with these discussions, you want to discuss what they're looking for. So maybe you go like right before you have a match, so then they want to say, I want you to score 6 cones on the top, and then you can do that in the match that you have the next time you see them. So then it's super easy to like show your skills and to show what they exactly need, and they'll be more likely to pick you. And then you also want to like sell yourself. So how do you add value to their alliance? Why should they pick you? There's 30 other robots that they could be picking. Why are you the one that they want to pick? You can do this by saying like, oh, I'm a shelf bot, and you guys are a shoot. I scored these many, but use your data. So make sure you have like a whole list of averages and stuff to back up your word, and always be honest. Never just lie and say you can do like 100 autos when you can't. Like, that's not going to end up good for anybody, and it's just going to make you look silly if you're lying, and it's not going to go out well. Yeah, so that's really cool. So to recap everything that we just talked about, first we started off with the purpose of scouting. So the purpose of mat scouting, pit scouting, how we track, what we track. And then we talked about our scouting breakdown, so how we run scouting, how most other people run scouting, and then how we train our kids. And then we talked about how we determine our scouting metrics, what to kind of look for, what to think about in the future. And then we talked about some match strategy stuff, and then how we implemented SQL this year. And then we ended with pick list creation. Any questions?
Yeah, you want to see that?
Yeah, we can pass around our app. At the bottom, you can click tabs at the bottom if you can see. So we have like pre-match, match, and then post-match. Different things.
And before IRI, we tried to switch to the completely subjective version of the app because we were like, oh, we could just get the data from Statbotics. And that didn't work.
I can tell you all about it.
Yeah.
I don't use it anymore.
Oh, should I? Oh. So with Statbotics, oh yes, go ahead.
How long do you guys usually make the scouting trips?
So they're normally like an hour. We've done longer in the past, but scouters get tired and then get hungry and stuff, and they want to enjoy the competition. So we do scouting for an hour, and then we'll go to the pits for an hour, kind of like back and forth.
Or I think this year it was mostly like scouting for 2 hours, pit for 2 hours.
Yeah. Yeah,
We
when we got
switched to that halfway through.
when we got later in the season, we switched to longer